Good morning. So we're going to go ahead and get started. Just a few housekeeping notes. You've probably heard these a few hundred times so far, but silence your phones if you don't mind. Photography is permitted. We are recording these sessions, so those will be available. And also, the questions and answers, we have 3 speakers today. Our first speaker ran into some childcare issues and so was not able to attend the meeting, unfortunately. So Nicole recorded her presentation, so she will not be available to answer any questions. We're happy to take any if you have them, and we can try to answer those. But we're going to have questions and answers after each presentation rather than waiting until the very end, because we're all kind of talking about different aspects of scholarship tracking. So thanks for your participation today. So we're going to go through 3 different topics, and I think all of these are going to apply in different ways to those of you in the audience. Nicole's going to talk about why acknowledgement matters, and she's going to spend some time talking about permanent identifiers, which maybe some of you use for your cores or for instruments in your cores, or maybe even antibodies that you use in your cores. Part 2 will be presented by Loida, and this will be a real-life experience of a librarian trying to track publications for cores. And she's got a great story to tell and some interesting anecdotes, which will probably resonate with many of you. And then I'm going to close this out presenting on a publication tracking tool that we've been working on at UNC Chapel Hill School of Medicine for a couple of years, and where we're at in that development process. So if we could get some help to bring up the recording.
To you on optimizing research visibility and shared research resources using publications and RRIDs. So I am Nicole White. I am an assistant professor at Cincinnati Children's. I am also a part-time program manager of our research share facilities, where I've had a tenure there for about 12 years before I decided to switch into a faculty position. So to kick us off, what is an RRID? An RRID is also known as a research resource identifier. It's a part of a family of name and nomenclature called persistent identifiers. PIDs are something that, as you'll see through this presentation, that we actually use on a daily basis to be able to help us identify key locations for pieces of information. So if you're a published author, you will know that you use an ORCID ID. Sometimes you submit your manuscripts to journals. When you go to a website, you use a URL. Publications are also using what are called DOIs. These are ways that you can link directly to the article much more quickly. And then now we're going to talk to you more about RRIDs and how you can potentially use these in your research share facility. So DOIs are used all around us. RRIDs are used all around us on a daily basis. RRIDs are something that we have the decision and the capacity to decide how we want to use them, because there is some flexibility built around them. You can use them to identify your organization, give your organization a number so that people can use that number to reference it. You can give it to your share facility, documents, software, projects, biological components like cell lines, cell cultures, unique physical properties, instruments, specific reagents, and identifications of lot numbers. The world is really your oyster as to how you want to decide what to do and how to manage your RRIDs within your science and your institution. So pervasive identifiers, as I mentioned, are not new. They've been around for a long time. The early PIDs originated from government population registries. I'm sure most of us also have things like a social security number that is a form of a PID. We also use those numbers to streamline administration, taxation, identification of individuals. We use that with the growth of the bureaucratic and welfare systems to link individuals to services across health, education, and social programs. Advancements in biometric technologies are also forms of a PID. fingerprints, iris scans. Those are all forms to authenticate identity without documentation. And so in general today, PIDs underpin digital identity across ecosystems and allow us to understand and use and identify who is who. However, there does remain a number of debates across the system on how to use this in a form of data governance, consent, and what that does to individual rights. We're not going to get into that for this presentation, though. So RIDs, as I mentioned, support identity. And here we're going to focus mostly on how they can support an identity for research share facilities. They help to address challenges such as name changes over time. I know within our institution we have named some of our share facilities differently, but they still have similar technologies, and we want to maintain their line of legacy. Locating contact information for shared research resources. I know that some of you may be familiar with Core Marketplace. This is a great place where we can use a database that is centrally managed to be able to know how to contact a shared facility through a centralized database, regardless of who changes as the manager or the staff within that facility at any one time, and also helps to address name variations in publications. An example that I've run into in the past personally is that people within our institution will cite some of our research resources and call them 10 different things. For example, our flow cytometry core will be called flow cytometry core, cell sorting core, flow and analysis core. All those different little name variations can really impact how you're trying to search and identify publications, but in having an RRID or a number attached to the facility that people can use consistently across their publications or references is an easy way for us to improve searchability in database engines. So RRIDs can be searchable. They are identifiable within most databases. And it's an easy way for us to track publications that are associated to our share facilities. So PIDs in general do have a process. They have a process, as I mentioned. In this case, we use Core Marketplace as our central managing system, where we tag it with a number. We use a PID service, which in this case is Core Marketplace. That Core Marketplace will then house and maintain the number or the RRID and the associated information that correlates with that RRID and present it as a digital object. Then what happens is you can now use that number and reference and put it across places for people to reference within your institution. So RRID acknowledgement is really important, as I've been talking about, but to really hone in more on the importance of it is important to acknowledge shared research resources. It really helps to optimize our visibility, also our rigor and reproducibility. So if there's something down within a publication or a paper or something that someone's presenting on, if you have that RRID in your presentation or your publication, that person that's interested in learning more will know exactly where to go and who to contact, because you have the means of the central database, or in this case, Core Marketplace, to make sure you're contacting the right group. Being able to contact that facility to understand their processes allows that interested person to understand the exact methods, technologies, or ways that the research is done if someone's trying to duplicate it or replicate it and learn something more. From an institutional perspective, tracking share facility publications also demonstrates the importance and value that they have within our research environment. This helps us to provide a return on our investment to our organization. It also allows us to demonstrate the valuable level of research that they are contributing to our investigators. We use these to also make sure that we can get some S10 grants, more instrumentation funding from the federal government. We can leverage them to do other types of funding aims to be able to demonstrate the value that SRRs have done. And then we also can use that to demonstrate, if we didn't have them, what the impact on our research would be. So SRRs overall do help to enable research by supporting studies with expert advice, consultation, training, and guidance by individuals who oftentimes work within their respective field for many years. Many of these individuals are not working in individual research labs, so they often are kind of left off of the authorship list sometimes, but in acknowledging the work that they can do within their SRR, it really demonstrates their expertise as well. It helps them to level up with their professional development at the same time. So RRDs also support FAIR practices and rigor and reproducibility. So really quickly, FAIR is a principle that is really being honed in on, especially now, that we make sure that all research that is published and generated has a findability, accessibility, interoperability, and reusability aspect associated with it. I'm not going to get too deep into this, but It is a really important aspect for us to know that RRDs can really support fair practices, and as I mentioned earlier, really help us to enhance the rigor and reproducibility of what shared research resources do for scientific generation of knowledge. Really helps us to ensure that we're developing robust, unbiased experimental design, data analysis, and reporting, and just using consistent identification to support those metadata standards. So how do you create an RRID? So you can create an RID by going to SciCrunch, or in our case, we generally use Core Marketplace. And then we will submit our information to them. It's usually your name, the contact information, where they're located, a website address, a brief description of your shared research resource, and some other details and information that you can include in there. Oops. You send that to them. They'll return to you a number that is an RRID. You can place that on your website, in your email signature, door entryways. Some people have found it successful to be placing it at their computers where people do analysis. You can also put it on your posters and presentations, wherever you want to generate some information or attraction to remind people that it's important to now use this RRD instead of the name of the shared facility when they're referencing or acknowledging the work that's being done by them. Then you can start to track your RRID. It'll take a little bit of time to kick people to use it and get this number out and generating. But we're seeing a good response rate of people starting to actually use this in lieu of just the name when they're publishing. So use that RRD to really search and identify your core facility acknowledgements, and then you can put those into buckets or tiers for each of your share facilities or your own share facility to be able to track how people are referencing and acknowledging the work and the type of work that people are doing with your facility. This can all be reportable and then shared with your leadership or evaluated to just demonstrate your KPIs or key performance index of how well your share facility is doing contributing to research and science overall. So a lot of this information that I've been talking to you about is in a paper that we published last summer. Patricia and Doug and I put together a paper called Optimizing Research Visibility, the role investigators and shared research resources and publications have using RRIDs. This is published in JBT. Within it, it gives you the frame of context and why it's important to use RRIDs, a little bit of the history on RRIDs, and then also that infographic that I had in the previous slide on how to generate an RRID if you're interested in pursuing that. And I believe Nate is actually going to be here as well, and Nate helps to run the Core Marketplace database out of Vermont. So what do we do at Cincinnati Children's? I just wanted to give you a little brief example as we get into the next two presenters. We all use RRDs in a little bit of a different way from one another. So at Cincinnati Children's, we leverage them just for our shared facilities. We don't really get down into the instrument level or any further detail than that because it's just too much to manage from our perspective. We have about 30 shared facilities at Children's that we have to manage. So each facility has a registered RRID within Core Marketplace. The research administrators, myself or Sarah McLeod, who's training with me to take my place, will manage the name changes and leadership, update edit information associated with each RRID. So the practices are that we list them on our ordering pages within our billing system, our invoices to our PIs, the directors place them in their email signatures, and then we also put them down below in our email documents. The information about the use of RRIDs are also placed on our research website for shared facilities. And then finally, we actually use Symplectic to do our overall tracking of publications. Primarily, this is set up just for our faculty members to have an individual profile. That information is then pulled by faculty ORCID ID. However, RRIDs cannot be leveraged yet. And I'm bringing this up because in my dream world, I'd love to see RRIDs used as an individual profile. So in most cases, the shared facility will not have an ORCID ID, but they will have an RRID. So I'd love to see our organization or even some publication tracking software systems be able to use the RRD in place of an ORCID ID so that we can pull in those publications for shared facilities as if they were an individual and be able to profile and track their own publications. So that's all I have for today. I really appreciate you guys listening, and I'm really sorry that I can't be there, but I'll turn it over to Chris and Loida. Thank you.
So while we're switching over, I'm just curious, how many of you are using RRIDs? Okay, that's good. Are they working? Yeah. An identifier is only useful if people put it in the scholarship, right, in the publication or abstract. So it's slide 15. So, yeah, that one.
adjust this because I'm a little shorter. All right. Can y'all hear me? Sweet. Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Loida Pan. I'm the Research Impact Librarian at NYU Langone Health. Today I'll be talking a little bit about course publication tracking at my institution, what that looks like, some of the challenges we're facing, and what we're hoping for in the future. There we go. So to give you a little bit of information, background about publication tracking at NYU Langone, we have a faculty bibliography. It's homegrown. We harvest publications using PubMed, Web of Science, and Scopus data. And I maintain that database. It's used to populate our faculty profiles. It's also used by various other departments in our institution for dashboards, reporting, promotion and tenure committees, things like that. We do work with the cores in our institution to help them track their publications, but this has been an issue. There are many problems that have arisen. I started working at the institution 3 years ago, but my predecessor, Stuart Spohr, worked on this project with the cores for many, 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 many years to a mixed level of success. Clearly, it is still an issue because last year we had a meeting set up with all of the course directors because they were very excited to know that there is a new research impact librarian working at NYU because they wanted to see if we had any new ideas for tracking publications. All right, next. So some of the challenges that we found with publication tracking is in order to pull those reports, we do ask cores to keep a list of current faculty identifiers, KIDs. Those lists are really time-consuming to maintain. There's a lot of change in faculty. A lot of the times we're running with very limited amount of people and time, and so this just gets really complicated. When we do pull publications for our cores, a lot of the time they produce false positives that require manual review because we kind of go overboard, right? Our pull is very broad, and so it is up to the course to take those massive lists that we pull and to review them manually. It can be a really long process. However, Stuart before me hadn't found a better way to do this, and the core directors also couldn't find a better way to do this. So like I said, we met with representatives last year to discuss potential improvements to the workflow. And my colleagues and I came up with 4 different methods that we would review with them. So the first was to search for core directors and or PIs who use the core to pull a publication report. We also thought about searching on grant number of the grant supporting the core. We did think about searching for names of equipment used by the core. And then finally, we brought up the idea of using RRID to pull publications. So we're going to start with the first option, which is to search for core directors and or PIs who use core resources using the faculty bibliography. This was really comprehensive. It pretty much would capture everything, right? But the problem is that it's everything. This was very frustrating for them to hear. They really wanted a new solution. We said this might be the best one, but we'll present a few others. The administrative assistants were especially frustrated because a lot of the time that manual labor is placed on their to-do list, and they found that it was too overwhelming. The other choice was to use to search on RID of the core. Nicole talked about how wonderful they are, and I really do love them. I'm also a really big fan of the ORCID. However, we have seen that they're only as useful as long as people use them, right? And it's been really difficult to get people to use them in our experience. Excuse me. Even with orchids, I find that a lot of faculty members don't use them. They are gaining popularity, but it can still be really difficult to persuade people to include them. Yes, many people won't use RRID. We've had many campaigns to try to encourage people to use them, and they simply do not. And for our own purposes, the RRID is not indexed in PubMed or any of the other databases that we use currently, and so it would be very difficult to incorporate it into our workflow. At this point, we had a core PI stand up and just raise his arms in frustration and ask whether or not we could blackmail people into using them, and we had to calm him down and tell him that we could not. He said, what if we email them and we make them feel really bad and then ask them to promise? And my colleague and I went, no, I bet you they wouldn't read that email either. These are really busy people. I hope that in the future we do have more uptake. We also, again, thought about searching on grant number and then searching on the name of equipment to at least be able to kind of limit the output that we gave them to work with. The problem is that not everyone acknowledges a grant, and not all grant publications are related to the cores, so we found that this was not really helpful to them. And like Nicole mentioned, a lot of the times people use different ways of describing equipment, so it would be difficult to come up with a comprehensive list to search, and it would require a lot of work on our end too. So we decided to continue with option 1, which relies on pulling publications using KIDs from the faculty bibliography. You can tell I'm frustrated and I wish I had better news to tell people, but unfortunately that's what we're working with. A lot of the times libraries just don't have the bandwidth to do this work. I know that the cores also don't. And so it continues to be a real problem. We have another meeting set up in a few months with the core directors. We'll see how that goes. Hopefully we can give them an update that is maybe more positive. But as of now, we're still sticking with the same workflow. And again, this is really difficult because it requires just an extensive amount of manual review. And we don't have the bandwidth right now to explore other options. So this is something that's really common in publication tracking. We find that even when we use permanent identifiers, it can be really difficult, right? A lot of the times faculty members are frustrated because we don't seem to capture all of their publications on their profile, but there are issues that pop up there as well, right? ORCID is sometimes not included in the metadata that we look for when we're pulling in publications. So there's a massive amount of problems that arise. But that is my part of the presentation. I'm happy to take any questions or concerns, or if anyone has the same experience, I feel you. It's pretty hard out there.
Any questions? Could you go to the microphone, please?
Oh, yes.
It is now. Great. Sorry about that. So I must be very fortunate because we actually have a lot of success with RRIDs, at least within my core. It was a long process. It was a very guilt-trippy process. What really worked for me was just the first handful of years, every training, every time I interacted with people, like, don't forget to acknowledge the core, don't forget to acknowledge the core. And then I'd find papers where we didn't get acknowledged, and I'd print it out, and I'd walk around with it until I ran into the student, and I was like, this is a great figure from my microscope. You know what an acknowledgement would do for me? Make sure we have more equipment. And it really took a lot of time,
Yeah.
but it really pays off. Now, I don't know about you guys, but we don't publish like that many papers, like 30 maybe in a year, if like that's a super fantastic year. So it's actually not very hard to stay on top of it, right, as well. So my question to you, because we do have this issue, have you encouraged your cores to like spend an hour every couple of weeks just going through a standard PubMed search or Google Scholar, which is what I prefer?
I think we have, so from my understanding, our cores do publish more, and there just does seem to be a problem with PubMed searches for us. I do know that there is a campaign currently to push for the RID in our institution. It's just that, it's been going on for years, and we haven't had much success with it. And I think that a lot of the times the cores will turn to the library because we have a really good relationship. And it just still involves a lot of manual review with them.
Absolutely, but again, I very few cores I think are really publishing like 20 papers a month, which means you can probably capture a lot of it. You just have to build it into what you have to do. And I say that it sounds very trivial and easy, but the peer pressure at the graduate student level is a great way to build up the reputation for people to acknowledge the course, because they don't like to get caught out.
That's certainly something that I'll bring to the next meeting. I definitely came here to see what y'all were doing and to kind of see if we could replicate some of your success stories. So I will keep that in mind. Thank you.
If you guys are successful in threatening people, please let me know.
Yeah, I mean, I would love to know how y'all do that, because we really don't know.
Hi. I'm not familiar with RIDs at all. Our core doesn't use one. I think we should use one, but I saw you said it's not searchable in PubMed.
It is not.
So
there is no field right now in PubMed, or back when we were looking at this issue.
I
But Core
see.
Marketplace does give you a printout of every time that your RID has been used, so
Oh,
you don't
okay.
have to discreetly search for it.
I see. So there is a place where you can click on your RID and then see. Okay. Excellent. Thanks.
I had a comment, I guess a couple of comments thinking about how do we track. I think it's sometimes a twofold problem, because you first have to find prospective manuscripts, then you have to search to find out whether or not you exist in them. We're finding that ORC IDs tend to work better, although it's not universal, but I think we're going to see an increasing trend, particularly with NIH Reporter. Everything's about metrics, everything's about metadata, and the ORC ID is going to become more prevalent, I believe, that for every publication, every individual must have an ORC ID. So that's one opportunity to integrate there. So if you use a shared resource, you must have an ORC ID as part of your registration process, and we're working now to do that. The other thing is, where publications show up and are really important and everybody always reports them, promotion and tenure. So are you working with your academic departments for the individual departments and programs that use your shared resources? So liaising with those administrators might be a good way to back reference all of your users of your facility and all of their publications. I guarantee you they will show up there.
I agree with you 100%. I will say, though, that I think there are idiosyncrasies with every institution. I am part of the promotion and tenure committee, and you would be surprised to find that a lot of faculty, before they go put together the packet, they actually don't look at their publications.
Even their annual reviews?
Even their annual reviews. Wow. We don't get, we will have people who either look at their publication list a day before it's due, and there's a mad dash to get publications up and running, Or we have, you know, faculty who have been at the institution for years who I don't think they have looked at their publication list. So definitely we have people who are, most of the people are on top of it. And we really love those people. I get emails from them every time they publish something, right? But that's not the case universally, at least at NYU, unfortunately. I would love if people would, but I think any bibliometrician or any person who is really deep in the world of scientometrics or research impact will tell you that it is a really flawed system.
One other comment, we have an RID, we use it. Well, we hope people use it, maybe that's the better way to say it.
Yeah.
One caveat that we are finding, again, as we move forward with expanded metrics for tracking activity on extramural funding, what we're finding is that the RID is really not sufficient. It's a good way for saying, hey, we were a core facility, but for all of the investments that I receive across multiple funding sources, they don't care. They want to see their grant.
Yeah.
So it's not only the RRID, it's about crafting a very, very short cut and paste template document. But just as an FYI, to get credit, the RRID doesn't give me the credit that I want. It helps me track some activity. So just a flag, make sure you get those numbers in. And we're finding when we report, it's actually, did my grant numbers show up or not? Particularly important for those S10s.
Thank you.
Hi. I'm curious. I'm also relatively new to the RRID thing, but something I'm really interested in is how we can maybe be tying tracking to individual data pieces, right? That's something that I think would be really useful, especially now that publications are more and more requesting deposition of the whole data set, right? We need like raw data. And I'm wondering whether if there were a system where RRIDs were pinned to a data set right from the get-go, would that be something that you think would help this problem? It sounds like maybe there needs to be more than that, and I would love to speak to you actually. But I'm wondering like kind of what you think about that, or what anybody thinks about that, and whether that will be something that might be useful.
For data sets?
For you guys to get your credit. So I'm thinking if you could tag your RIDs to your data sets when they're required to be uploaded to begin with, right? And now that publications are requiring that, that might start to pave a way towards you guys like having an easily searchable database that you could say like in which publications is my RID present. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, I can
Yeah.
say that that's definitely, sorry.
No, go ahead.
But that's definitely a trend. But the problem is that, you know, depending on the scope of study, the instrumentation and the automated resources behind that, they all differ. You know, and so the trend is unevenly distributed, let's say. So it's going to work for some areas of study that have like very specific instrumentation and very specific softwares behind it, and it's not going to work for others. But it's definitely like as work becomes more automated, you know, these permanent identifiers are working their way in at the time of experimentation as opposed to, you know, at the end. And yeah, I think we're going to see, you know, sometime down the road, we're going to see like a more automated process. We're going to see, you know, more tagging of information as it's being created, as opposed to trying to do a mad dash to gather it all again. But it's happening. But, you know, as William Gibson said, not evenly distributed.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Mark Seekers. I'm with AIP Publishing, and I'm happy to be here. But I'd like to kind of point out, I guess, where we think we have leverage over the researchers and the microeconomy of researching is at the publication point and at the grant recipient point. So at the publication point, we can ask for certain things like RIDs and structured data. So I'm curious what publishers can do to help with tracking and capturing this and organizing and structuring it. So is there...
Yeah.
generated and then require them to input the name of it or make it a checkbox.
Yeah.
Should ABRF use their weight to ask publishers to use this as part of a checklist?
Yes.
and organizing
That would be great.
Organizing what that is, you know, in some type of guideline or detail roadmap is really helful for us. So we can,
Bioimaging North
yeah.
America has done that for
Okay, great.
microscopy it seems like it's something that a committee could do for ABRF to talk to the publishers.
Thank you.
This is fun.
About that checkbox, ABRF tried that like 10 years ago with cell precedent. It didn't work. Doesn't mean we can't do it again. We just have to figure out why it didn't work and retry it again. Because I think that's the best way. But it'd be also, well, in an ideal world, the funding agencies would require us to do that too. Right. Sorry.
So that was similar to what I was going to bring up with the whole Science CV new biosketch format. It seems like there is a possible opportunity there because A, it's crediting fewer publications than even was before in the biosketch, and it's relying more on the NCBI bibliography and maybe giving research administrators more access to that than they did before when PIs were just uploading their PDFs. So my question is, instead of Google Scholar and things like that, is there a way in NCBI for what they need for their progress reports, for their grant submissions, to have a core RRID linked as well as like an ORCID or something like that? Could we go with NCBI? Because if we were to have the ability to update the NCBI bibliographies with cores, that's what they're looking to link. And when that's read, they can't submit, right? So I guess that's my question is like, could we use that sum towards our benefit for cores as well? In like a library sense. Like, do you have any NCBI bibliography? Like, do the libraries engage with that at all?
So we do engage with it, but the problem is that we have our own publication tracking system. And so we don't really live in that world as much. And so that would require, so the fun thing about publication tracking is if you sit down with your librarians and talk with them, you'll find that everyone has a very different system. And it would require building some sort of workflow or having conversations with them from the start. And it would require potentially reviewing the way that we track publications and making big changes. I think that is a really good idea. It's something that I would have to bring up and get a lot of support. And the problem, I don't know if y'all know this about libraries, but they don't like change. And it is also difficult to change behavior with our users as well, and incorporate new systems. I think that it would be really amazing. I just, from my perspective, really like working with people every day and having those conversations, these are all really great ideas and I love them. And I think it would probably solve a lot of our problems. But a real practical application can be a little bit more difficult. What I'm understanding is that there is a lot of interest from y'all, and that does give me a little bit more faith to go into these conversations with our core directors to try to establish some sort of change. So thank you. This was really great for me. I'll hand it over.
Thanks, Loida. All right. So I'm going to talk to you about a tool that we've been working on at UNC Chapel Hill School of Medicine for the past couple of years. We presented this in a poster, I think back in 23. I guess what I'll start by saying is if this was easy, then somebody would have already done it. And so we're trying to figure out, and we think we may have potentially cracked this. And it was, I'm representing the work of a bunch of people. And so I'm here today to thank them for all of their hard work. Carrie Clisselt's back there. She worked on this. And then we have a core at UNC that's called Abacus Evaluation, and they do this for a living. They're a data visualization type core, and so they've put a ton of effort into this. So we're calling this tool Breakthrough, boosting research extraction with keyword tracking. And I'm going to take you through our development process and kind of where we are today. So I don't have to restate this, but I will. We have a problem. None of us have figured this out. It's very manual. It's hard to do, but it's so important, right? To be able to demonstrate our return on investment to those that hold the resources is incredibly important. We all know that. And what we do is produce scholarship, publications, support grants, intellectual property, dissertations, research innovation. Our cores are the backbone of research productivity. But we suffer from a critical attribution deficit. That's what we're calling it these days. They just don't cite us. And it's not insidious. It's not mean. It's just sloppy. And it's unfortunate, and it impacts all of us. And so we have lived with it for a long time. We've figured out ways to work around it and try to get at the information that our cores generate, that's in the papers and the grants and the dissertations. And some of us do it better than others. But the current mechanisms are all over the place, and you've heard that here today. And they're also fraught with data loss. We're not getting all of it. And so we have a failure here where authorship is a structured data field. It's pretty easy to work with author names, right? It's indexed, it's standardized. You can get it with the different APIs we have out there, PubMed, Scopus, Dimensions. You can put a name in with initials or whatever, and you can find it. And that's great. That's helpful. But acknowledgements of shared resources is unstructured data. It may be anywhere in the manuscript, right? It may be in acknowledgements. It may be in materials and methods. It may be in a footnote somewhere. It may not be there at all, which often happens as well. But it's free text, and it's buried, and there's no standard format, so it makes it hard to retrieve. We've talked about manual searches. We've talked about Google Scholar alerts. I think you all would probably agree if you've used these. They suffer from maybe more than two failures, but at least low recall. They miss implicit mentions. Nicole said this earlier, the flow course called 10 different things, right? Well, okay, that's inconsistent, and so the tool's only going to be able to do whatever terms you put in. We see a high return of false positives, and Loida talked about that as well, and how frustrating that is to have to go through these long lists and sort everything out. So this disconnect creates a gap in the data, and we propose that our tool Breakthrough may address this data gap. So here's our process. As I said, we first described this a couple of years ago at this meeting, and we have now worked really hard, and I'll just say, especially Kara, when we had this idea a couple of years ago, we decided to see if we could do this manually, and just went out there and sucked up all the publications that might be associated with a core at UNC, of which we have 140. It was all of Kara's hard work plus a couple of summer students who we paid to do this brute force sorting, right? And so we did a lot of this manual work and said, okay, this is doable if you use the right search strings. So we need to find a partner that can help us automate this process. And that's what we did. We started working with Abacus. They've been a great partner. And the Dean's Office has provided strategic funding over the last several years, and we've actually been able to get some of that to support the development of this tool. So here's our workflow now. Here's our process. The first step is ingest. That's what we're calling ingest. You build or you update the profile of the asset. We're talking about shared resources here at this meeting, but this can be any asset. This can be whatever you're interested in searching for in a center, in a department, in a university, in a company. So the asset would include all of the important identifiers, including permanent identifiers like RRIDs. We're using those. That's a great thing to use if they're cited in the paper. So we build the profile. We do the search using the pretty complicated algorithm, and we then get results back. Those results are binned into high, medium, and low confidence. The highs, we're sure this is your paper associated with your core. Even though you weren't mentioned in it, it has enough identifiers in it that we know this is yours. The medium is, we think this is probably yours, but maybe take a look at it. And the lows are, you need to look at this one. This may or may not be your paper. And so the core director gets a short survey that says, here's your results. Take a look at the medium and low. Click a box that says yes or no. And the results that they get back includes the citation, includes the terms that were used to search to find that paper or abstract or dissertation or whatever, the funding text, the acknowledgement text, and if there's not enough information on that one page, they can click a box and say, take me to the full paper. I need to see this, and make sure that it was my core that generated those images. Once they do that, they verify the results, then we take that final data set and build dashboards. We're using Tableau right now. We know there's a lot of other tools out there. But we can basically show the core of the data in any way that they want to see it. And I'm going to give you some examples of that. But we're looking at the bibliometrics, of course. We can do network analysis. What kind of topics does this core work on? The funding agencies that are funding the work that's using this particular shared resource. And then we have a data explorer that I'll show you a little bit about. So that's our process. That's how we're doing this now. Relatively automated, but not fully, in that there's still a human in the loop who has to say, yes, that's mine, no, that's not mine. Okay, and we want to get to a place where we don't want robots running the world, right? But we want that human component to be reduced significantly such that we can use AI to do the verification process. We're not there yet, but we hope to be. So I'm going to give you a few examples of the data that is returned and some of the dashboard. These are just examples from a core at UNC. This is the Mutant Mouse Research and Resource Center. It's an NIH-funded consortium of 4 resource centers around the country. And this is showing the number of publications, the number of journals that those papers are published in, the number of authors, how many of those are at Chapel Hill, and then how many citations. And this is the history of the core since it started. And so this is a cumulative representation of the number of papers. I'll point out that during COVID, there was this straight up line because everybody was at home writing papers, right? And so that was interesting. We didn't expect that, but it was there. So this shows us that of these almost 100 papers, only 46 UNC authors. So this core is having an impact well outside of UNC, right? And there are 728 authors outside of UNC Chapel Hill. We can show publishing trends. We can show the frequent research areas. You can see this one was in genetics and neuroscience. The most frequent authors on the papers, the most frequent funding organizations. This is important, right? Who's funding the work that's using this particular resource? NIH likes to know that. Our institutions like to know that. What journals are publishing these papers, and then which ones are the most highly cited. Again, these are just metrics. These are qualitative things that you can look at and use in different ways. The other thing is looking at the impact of these papers. So there's a lot of citation ratios out there that you can use. This particular one plots the relative citation ratio against the field citation ratio, gives those numbers based on the papers in the database. And you can see that here for the field citation ratio for this particular core at UNC, there are about 6 times more citations as the field average. So this course having a good impact on mouse work. What fields of research? You can see the number of papers in the different categories. And then may or may not be interesting to folks, but how much attention are these papers getting in social media or things like that? Are they getting mentions? And there's a ranking system using the altmetric attention score from the dimensions. Then the research network analysis. Yeah, this is tough to figure out what's going on. But basically what this is each of the nodes is a paper, and the authors are around that paper. The Tar Heel blue are the UNC authors, and the brown are the outside UNC authors. And so you can see all the authors represented, how they're associated with these papers. And, there are a few right there at the very bottom. That's a fully UNC paper, but then a lot of them are no UNC authors at all. They're using this resource outside of the institution. And so that's another way to look at it. We like this one a lot, is the human research classification system. So the categories, what fields are being impacted by the research that is done with the resources provided by this particular facility. What I will say is this is a static image, but in real life, you can hover over the paper and you can actually see information associated with it, so it's interactive. And the way this one works is there are categories, health research classification categories, subject areas that you see these clusters of the papers that are published associated with these areas of research. And so these, there are all kinds of different network analyses that we can do with this particular tool. Then we have a data explorer. This is actually the database of the papers, and this is interactive. Again, this is a static image, but you can see the summary data across the top, then all the papers are included in this database. You get this as part of the return for the search that we do for you. And it has searchable fields, and you can see those down the right side here. You can sort by year, you can sort by funder type, of course, authors, journals, the fields of research, and then grant numbers. And so that's something that was brought up earlier, some of the conversation, the ability to use grant numbers to search. This is just an example of what we can provide. There are a lot of other different ways that people want to see their data, and I'll show you some of the feedback we've gotten from core directors this past year of what they'd like to see. So where are we at? We have taken 29 cores through the entire process now at UNC. 7 cores are still in flight, going through this. And we're very pleased with the results in that 90% of the research products identified using our tool are valid. They're real hits, right? And so when you think about the medium and low, it's only really 10% of what we're getting. So there's a lot less to sort through. It's not thousands of hits, it's a few. And we have just expanded our pilot at UNC to 20 more cores. And so by the time we're done with these 2 pilots, we'll have about 55 cores, and that's a decent data set to show the impact of this tool. And so we are just at UNC right now. Based on the license that we have with the company that we're using, we are not able to provide data outside of UNC. We're currently negotiating to hopefully be able to do a pilot to be able to provide data outside of our institution. So let me take you through this complicated slide. This is, we wanted to show you how this tool works over and above doing a manual process. And so this graph represents the number of new publications across 38 cores that we took through the manual process. Okay, I know these numbers aren't lining up. So back in 22, we started on a bunch of cores. This data here represents 38 cores that went through the manual process. And then we layered breakthrough on top of that. And the numbers you're seeing here are the additional papers we found that weren't found with the manual process. Okay, does that make sense? So just to show the added benefit of the tool, and that it's actually superior to the manual process and obviously a lot easier to use. So in between 21 and 22, we stopped doing the manual as we were developing this tool. And so what you're seeing 22 through 25 there are the number of papers we're pulling with breakthrough for these 38 cores. So what we found was that the manual searches for these 38 cores from 2000 to 2022 missed 754 papers. And so that's a lot of miss, right? That's a lot of missing data to demonstrate return on investment for these cores. And so being able to pull that additional data in, we just ran all of this through. Okay, how many citations? You can see the data there, almost 84,000 citations for just these new papers, right, that we pulled. And so there's a huge impact of missed data. And so we're able to find those papers, those scholarly outputs now. And then that also allows us to run these citation ratios, and they're beautiful. On the field citation ratio, 8.28 is what we're seeing. So these papers are impactful. They're being cited, but we didn't even know they existed, right, until we added this process on top of it. So manual's good, but it's not great. And if it's what you've got, keep doing it. But adding this more complex search process on top of it is going to pull in a lot more information. All right, so for those 38 cores that we did through the manual process and then ran through breakthrough, here's the impact to date. So 9,800 publications, cited almost 775,000 times, and then you can see the relative citation ratio of 2.5 and the field citation ratio of 11. So that's just for 38 cores. Like I said, we have 140 cores at UNC. I look forward to seeing the numbers associated with those cores, but just with this limited data set, it kind of blew our minds. And these publications are across 286 different research areas, but you can see where UNC spends a lot of their money and time and their grant funding: neuroscience, genetics, cancer, biotechnology, and then on down. And you can see the number of publications in each of those areas from this data set of these 38 cores. So we're missing a lot, and we know we're missing a lot, right? And we want to be able to figure out a way to get at that data. So we've shared this with these core directors at UNC, and we've taken their feedback. This is more than just a list of references. When you show people data, the wheels start spinning, right? And they're like, what about this? Could you do this? So they've come up with a lot of great ideas. So on the left there, the core directors and staff, these are the things they suggested. They'd like to be able to search the publication lists in these papers for names of their staff members who may have been authors on those papers, or actually did the work in the paper that was referenced, so that they can track scholarly achievement and the impact of that staff member, maybe for performance reviews, things like that. I hadn't thought about that. That's a great idea. Identify the funding agencies behind the data they produce to strengthen agency-specific S10 proposals. I think many of us have applied for S10s. They want to see a lot of data associated with that. And I'll just give you an anecdote. We actually work directly with NIH ORIP. They're the ones that support the S10 program. And when they learned about this tool, they said, do you think this could be used for S10s? Because we don't know what the impact of our instruments are that we funded all these years. It's like, yeah, we could do that. And so we did a pilot at UNC. We've had 12 S10s awarded at UNC over the last 10 or 15 years. And we ran those instruments through the tool, right? And we got back a data set of, I don't know, almost 100 papers published associated with those instruments. And I sent that to NIH, and he's like, we've never seen this kind of data before. Is this something you could do for the whole system? I was like, yeah, we'd love to support you there. And then kind of the world fell apart, and they didn't have the funding to do it. So it has had some impact. That's great data for us to have as an institution, because our next S10, we can just put that in there and say, look how we've utilized the instruments that have been awarded to UNC. So that's just one potential other use. Identify and research topics to target institutional departments and centers for outreach. Where are we working the most? I showed you neuroscience and genetics, but where are we not? And maybe we should be targeting that. That's important to know as well, right? Because we could do outreach. Track the publication impact of specific instruments or technologies, which I just talked about. Identify impactful publications to showcase the core. The cores can already say we do amazing work, but then they can say, look at this Nature paper. We generated all the data that's in here, right? Or Joe pointed out earlier, this image. I generated this image, and it's in this paper. Core directors love to brag about that stuff. And then they can use it in their advertisements as well, utilizing these infographics that we can generate on the dashboards. Core directors had a lot of great ideas, and we want to take as many of those on board as we can. Leadership, so research leadership in the institution, provide data for reporting requirements. Think about all your center grants, instrumentation grants, the different programs. We're getting ready to renew our Cancer Center grant, and they've come knocking and said, can you give us all the data for all our cores? Yeah, we can do that, and we can actually do it in a vertical to just show the Cancer Center cores. And so I think that'll be a powerful tool for them to use as well. All grants require annual reporting, right? And especially our center grants, it's incredibly important. Look at trends, look at fields of research. Where are we impactful, where are we not? Identify impact of access to a pipeline of cores. 3 or 4 cores are working together. We can run a search on those cores and see how many papers those collaborating cores are generating. And then identify internal funding programs supporting work in our core facilities to strengthen opportunities for investment and impact. There's just a lot of different things that the data can be used for. So where are we at? We're planning to scale up for all the core facilities in the School of Medicine. That's about 85. We'll be about more than halfway there in the next month or so. Onboard and scale up all the core facilities at UNC. as we can. We'll need funding to do that, but we could get everybody on board. Market and onboard other interested units at UNC. I'll just tell you, we're talking to anybody that will listen right now, all the way up to the Vice Chancellor's office, to show them what we can do and how it could benefit the state of North Carolina. And then establish some type of payment schedule, fee structure for what this is going to look like. Maybe have a tiered structure, standard, plus, and premium. What level would you like to use the tool? So our delivery model build out, kind of what our future plans are, what we hope to do is have cloud-based access, subscription-based licensing, or some type of strategic partnership that might make sense, integration of the API and customization, and then we're not going to just say, here's the tool, have fun, to actually train. So that's what we're doing now. We take the core director through it, say this is how you build your asset profile, and then we take them through the data once they get it so they can understand what they've got. And so that's really important. And then the goal overall is to provide a software as a service architecture. So licensing to universities, cores, or licensing to existing research information management companies that are out there. We're open to talking about this with anyone. Like I said, if this was easy, it would have already been done. And if it was cheap, it would have already been done. But it's not. It's complicated to get these systems to talk to each other and have the outputs that you want. So for my last slide, should we get the opportunity to provide data outside of UNC Chapel Hill, we need some beta testers. And so if you would like to scan that QR code, there's a brief survey. Tells us about who you are, how many cores you have. If you're interested in being part of a beta testing cohort, it won't be free because it's not free for us, right? And so we have to pay our abacus folks to do this work for you. But we would love to get some folks from outside of the institution to use this tool and give us feedback. We continue to iterate to make this the best we can. And you'll get something out of it. You'll be provided with tailored dashboards, see the data the way that you would like to see it. Everybody get a chance to scan it. Hopefully that worked. All right, I am going to stop there. Any questions or comments? Yeah, Jeff.
Hey, Chris. So it sounds like you got some great feedback from at least some of the core directors. So overall, how have the core directors responded? Have they all just jumped in to review their publications? Have you had some eager people and then some laggards? Is it like, roughly speaking, I know you're trying to lower the human interaction. Have you lowered it far enough yet that everybody does this, or most people do it? Or is it still a struggle to get them to review the hard-won list that you've created for them?
Yeah, so you know how this goes, right? I mean, I'd say for the most part, folks have been excited to do it. We've strategically selected the cores that we wanted to go through the pilot for different reasons, right? Cancer Center cores, that's really important. Some cores from the college, because we want to show them that we can actually do this. And I will say that I don't care what, 5 to 10% of the directors are like, I don't have time to fool with building my profile. And she's even gone to say, okay, just get on the phone with me. We'll get on a Zoom and we'll build your profile in real time because you're really going to want this data, you know. And so it's been more on the front end, getting them to build the profile. We've got a great tool that we send out to them. You just got to fill these boxes in. That's all you have to do. But it's been a little bit tough with a few folks. Yeah.
But mostly people are happy to participate. Yeah.
I mean, we have a few core directors from UNC here. Michelle, I don't know what your experience.
Super easy. I mean, the profile, and then if I was like, oh, I have some questions, jumped on a Zoom, did it fast, and then the lists that you get are curated, and they're batched in like 10 or 15. So it's easy to do 10 high priority ones in a few minutes between some Zoom calls, and then another time later I do another 10. And so it was very manageable, and I just checked my profile while you were talking. You guys found 9 publications in the past 2 years that my manual search didn't find. So like that alone was totally worth it for me. Like I didn't expect it to be that many.
On average, how many is a core director reviewing?
Do you know, Karen?
I would say
Yeah, and the idea going forward is that once we see that that particular search term was problematic, it gets kicked out, right? The algorithm is going to be hopefully smart enough to say that didn't work, so let's adjust it. Again, trying to take the human out of the loop. But we've gone back, for some cores 20 years, and so that's a lot of data to sift through. But now we have all of that historical data. Just going 1 year at a time, or maybe going back 2 or 3 years, that's a lot easier. That's a smaller data set to have to sort through.
Thanks so much. I like what you showed at the end of how many more publications you found. Have you used your data to say what percentage of them actually acknowledge the core, what percent acknowledge the S10 I need, what percent acknowledge the Cancer Center, to show that they're not doing it? Because I feel like what keeps coming up in all these questions, we have these great tools, or we're getting to these great tools, but education is still needed.
Absolutely. Yeah, we haven't done all of that data analysis yet. I think it's a great point and something that we could do. Do you have an update?
We've started to, and
Yeah.
I'm so excited about it because all of these things become essentially different search strategies, and for each core it ends up being 50 to 100 different search strategies, and we can go in and see which ones were found the publication, essentially like pushed it up into one of those buckets, because some it's taking multiple things, sort of clues that this was from a core instrument, and that it's that conglomerate of 4 or 5 different text indicators that push it up, right? And so we're starting to go in and see, okay, which ones are people using, how is that changing over time? Like, some of this data has just come back out to us in the last month or so, so we're still getting it. But I'm so excited about it.
All right, great. So question for the panel and more so for the general audience. So you've searched and you found papers that haven't cited your cores or your facilities. The PI did it willfully ignorant or just by mistake? So what's the next step? I mean, how do you correct that? So you found these papers and you want it to count towards your core or your NCI redesignation or something. What's the next step to correct that oversight?
Anybody have any ideas? So what did you say earlier, Loida? We blackmailed them, or we beat them over the head with it? I think it's once they see that we can get at the data, it almost creates oh, I better not leave this out next time. It almost creates a shame culture in a way such that I'm going to find it, so why don't you just go ahead and tell us you use the shared resource. The other thing is using this to get more investment in the cores is going to benefit the research enterprise, right? So the PIs actually will benefit if they'll just do this. It also supports the rigor and reproducibility as well, because if a core is doing work and getting published in it, they've got the protocol, and we need to have access to that, right? And so being able to find that, I think there's different ways to do it, but somebody said it earlier, it's an education. We got to keep telling them, but now we have a way to find it, whether they do it or not. And that's not the answer. We don't want them to continue to not cite, right? We want them to see that we'll find it, so why don't you just go ahead and do this for us up front?
And that's great in hindsight, but once you have the paper in hand and you need that to count towards your reports, is there institutional policies that are available, or is there a way to take your information and say that this legitimizes our finding and we need to count this towards our reporting, or is it just don't cry over spilled milk?
I believe PubMed Central has tools available that you can update the indexes used to go into those papers. So you're not going to affect the original publication, but at least in PubMed Central's records, you can get citation numbers, identifiers, grant numbers, whatever, put in there so that they do count, in the general query.
We've gotten conflicting responses on whether you can add them after the fact if they haven't actually put the identifier into the paper.
That's a practice we use regularly at UVM in Vermont because our IMBRI requires grant numbers, obviously. And we've been able to go back to various papers and say, get that grant number in there, and they do.
And it's required for the S10, and they tell you to go in and do it.
Yeah.
You give a paper, because then they index it in IT.
So another thing you can do, though, and one of our cores has started doing, is monitoring preprints more closely. Because then if you find it in the preprint that they have not acknowledged your core, or they haven't included somebody as an author who should be an author, you can go to them and say, hey, before you publish this in a peer-reviewed publication, please make sure that you include this individual as an author or this acknowledgement, and here is how you can word it. So you can, because PubMed is now including a lot of preprints, you can find them a little bit easier in your searches, but that's another suggestion, is start monitoring those preprints so that you can correct them before you have to go and say, hey, add this later.
I was just going to comment, we actually use the PubMed link where you can add that, and so it's pretty easy, and we actually include that in our acknowledgement statement, kind of a blurb about, hey, did you forget us? That's cool. Like, just add us in after the fact. And it's pretty easy. If you do it once or twice, you can write a really short SOP and give that to people, and sometimes that helps let people know ahead of time, like, oops, okay, move on. You can do it. It's doable.
So something that we do for those publications, for compliance purposes, they do not have a PMCID yet. We approach the lead authors and let them know that in order to get compliance and a PMCID, they need to upload the manuscript onto the NIMS website. And during that time, when they're doing the uploading, we provide them with the grant information and who the PI is, so that when they're adding the manuscript, there's a section where they have to add all the grants. They add in your grant, and then you automatically appear in the final PubMed section.
A couple of things addressing your concerns. How are we going about enforcing or encouraging authors to cite our cores? A lot of it is socialization. So we're using RRIDs. We have all of the core directors and all of the staff have an acknowledgement section in their signatures. And then we're also sending out a monthly newsletter to every customer of our cores, and there is a standard footer that mentions the acknowledgement and how to use the RRIDs. And for the past 6 months, we've been really socializing this approach, and we're seeing results really quickly. So like in the past 3 months, we have we've seen about 10 publications that have cited the cores using RIDs. We don't have a carrot, we don't have a stick, we're just trying this kind of gently. My questions for you, I'm super curious about what your query statements look like and how you're getting your information, but even more so, you mentioned that you have confidence levels of high, medium, and low. I'm super curious about that, and I'll just say, I have a process that I'm using where I'm following the money. So I take the money that's being spent in cores, and I translate those into the award numbers, and that, in addition to other search criteria, is how I'm going about, and we use Scopus, not PubMed. And so what I can do with that is when I get my query results, which sometimes are tremendous, I can then say, okay, well, I know this, against this grant, my core spent $100 or $1,000 or $15,000. So my confidence goes up the more money they spent, and then it's a manual process to send that list of publications back to the core directors. The core directors can then look, and they can, you know, I give them abstracts and some information, and if they want, they can go look at the whole publication, et cetera. But
I think it's a clever idea. We don't use the money. We don't follow the money in ours. I can't really say much about how our algorithms are built just because it's a trade secret right now. So, yeah, they're complex. As we said earlier, some of these are 50 terms long, you know, so to try to make sure you're getting at, you're not going to miss anything, but yeah, that's the important piece here.
do you have an idea of what the ratio is? Like, let's say you pull up 100 publications, how many of those are going to come out high, medium, and low, generally?
I did have an example of one we did recently. I think there were out of, let's say 100, there were maybe 10 medium and 10 low, something like that. So, and if you're only looking at a year or two, you know, it's a lot easier. When we were going back 20 years, you got a lot of junk. You got a lot of noise in there that you got to sort out. Yeah. So it depends on how big the data set is. really. Yep. All right, I don't want to keep anybody from lunch. Really appreciate y'all's attendance and participation. Thank you so much. Thank you. That was great. You did an awesome job.